everyone, my name is Abhirami. I'll be presenting on the topic female gaze in dark academia. Before we begin, I would like to explore what these concepts are. So dark academia is basically a social media aesthetic that came into popularity around 2017, but it began in 2015. What it revolves around is this aesthetic, right? It's a subculture that like grew gradually, but at the beginning it was only an aesthetic. It focuses on higher education, learning for the love of it, learning Greek and Latin and Greek poetry and all that. It's very elitist in a way, because the aesthetic itself is based on all these very capitalistic notions of what education should be like in a time when capitalism was just beginning, right? If you explore the aesthetic itself, you can factor it into clothing, the kind of places, the activities that people in this particular subculture do. So clothing, it's usually blazers and cardigans and tweed jackets and Oxford shoes and plaid skirts. These are very Eurocentric. The colors that this particular aesthetic demands are usually all these, brown earth tones, and sometimes navy blue, but these are very like dark colors, so white, black, brown, that variety. You don't find any like say yellow, that's like out of, it doesn't like fall into this particular aesthetic. The places, the activities that people in this subculture tend to romanticize, so to speak, is going to museums, going to art galleries, drinking coffee, drinking a lot of coffee, reading a lot of books, and studying all night, pulling all-nighters, and drinking alcohol. So alcohol consumption is also something that's very, very normalized and romanticized as well. So I've been using the word subculture all this time. So what is a subculture? So it's basically any culture that belongs to a particular group of people, but is differentiated from the parent culture. So to apply this definition to dark academia, the origins of the aesthetic itself stems from 1940s, 50s, where prep schools were at their peak. Americans were sending their kids to prep schools where there was, all these ancient languages were being taught. It was part of the curriculum. You have to learn math, English, Latin, Greek, and all that. So again, these prep schools were usually meant for the elite. You have to have a lot of money to get into prep schools. Now, this is not only based on the American prep schools. There are also universities in the UK that taught these subjects at that particular time. Now, it's also related to the Romantic poets and generally Victorian poets in general. It's again, as I told you, it's very Eurocentric. So these poets were Lord Byron, Shelley, and Oscar Wilde. Now, a prominent work that features in this subculture is the Picture of Dorian Gray. So that's like a classic that a lot of people tend to refer to as like beginnings of this subculture itself, because people of this subculture are inspired by that particular literary work. It has very like homosexual undertones. Now, this homosexual undertone really came up only in the early 2020s. Before that, it was all about like very heteronormative in a way, because again, only Shelley and Byron were being regarded as works that one should read if you have to get into the aesthetic, this particular subculture. With Picture of Dorian Gray, when that came into prominence, this book was actually written a long time back, but it came into prominence again only in the recent 2020s. So because again, it's related to the LGBTQ movement as well. Now there is more acceptance of queer literature in media, and now bringing back the Picture of Dorian Gray, which was demonized at the time it came out. This was the book that led to Oscar Wilde being imprisoned and eventually his death as well due to the imprisonment. The book itself has themes of murder, immortality, youth, beauty, hedonism, and indulging in all your senses. The story follows a young man who was painted by this painter He wishes that the painting would age instead of him so that he can retain his beauty. Eventually it's his wish comes true. There is no explanation as to why it happened exactly, and the series of hedonistic pleasures that he indulges in, that eventually leads to the painting getting aged, and like all his sins are being you can see it on the painting basically. And eventually it ends in murder. Along the way he's done a lot of bad things, and it's all about that aesthetic at the end of the day. Now it has homosexual undertones, the book itself. Now bringing this back is also in a way asserting that queer literature is valid. So that is very very common theme within this subculture. There is also books like Morris, If We Were Villains, The Secret History, Ninth House, Harry Potter, that are being incorporated into the subculture as things that you can aspire to. Because again, if you notice that all of these are written by white people, written in another country. So it's not really accessible to ethnic minorities or just in general people of color. There are also movies and TV series that also influence this particular aesthetic. There is Dead Poets Society, The Magicians, Umbrella Academy, series of unfortunate events. If you have watched these movies, you would see there's this common theme that's repetitive. It's mostly set in cold regions. There's also autumn that's constantly being portrayed in these movies. There is Gothic architecture. There is learning of all these, languages that right now you would consider esoteric, but at that time they were actually taught in school. But now that's not really the case. As you would know, we don't really learn for the love of learning. It's more like to get a degree, to get a job and work till you die. So in this kind of neoliberal setup, learning things for the joy of learning is not really there. Even you have a hobby, you like to write, you like to paint, there is always this constant expectation to turn it into a capitalistic venture, turn it into a business, so that you can earn money, so that you can live a better life. But are we really living a better life if we're constantly running after money and not enhancing our other senses, our need for artistic pleasure, our need for aesthetics, so to speak? Along these lines, the reception for this particular aesthetic has been that it's a reaction to how universities and generally higher education is very corporatized. And again, in the UK there was like a lot of cutback on funding for universities, which meant that people who had enough money to afford it were the only ones who could get into, say Oxford or Cambridge. In that kind of scenario, this seems like a very logical reaction to this happening, because these people can't. Again, people who participate in this subculture are usually mostly for the aesthetics, but there are people who can't afford that kind of learning because of the costs that it expects out of you, it demands out of you. In that case, you can at least live the life. You can at least look around you and see so many books. You can see coffee shops, you can go to museums, and museum doesn't cost a lot. You're just gonna go there and look at the art. When you can live the life, but you can't really imbibe that knowledge, even that at some point it's enough for some people. That, I think, that's one of the main reasons that this whole culture became very very prominent. And right now, because of COVID, since we all stayed at home, people had a lot of time on their hands. They were able to indulge in their hobbies, draw a lot, read a lot. Even I did that. I all the books that I haven't read in 2 years, I was able to sit down and read it because I had enough time. And I am someone who reads for the love of reading. And there are people like that, people who learn things for the love of it, not because it's going to give them some kind of capitalistic return. And this dark academia subculture is a place for people to, because people can't get these things in real life, they can't afford these things, they are finally able to come to a space online where they can live this life virtually, at least. If you look at all the posts, when you go on Tumblr and search up this hashtag dark academia, the posts are usually about wanting to live in a Victorian castle, or like a mansion, and running around in long black gowns and reading books, and falling in love with a ghost. And these are things that won't it won't happen in real life, because right now, again, as a society, as a global society, we don't involve in aesthetics as much as our ancestors did, maybe say 300, 400 years back. So now you go out and look at the buildings. They're not there for aesthetic pleasure. They're mostly for functional, how functional they are. They're defined by how functional they are. It's not. So if you go to Gothic, if you look at Gothic architecture, it's all about aesthetics. So that's why cities like Paris, Rome, they are also being romanticized a lot, because these are the places where remnants of that era are still there. And it's, again, it exists in the middle of capitalism, but it also in some ways satisfies our need for that aesthetic. So related with this is the concept of, again, something that I mentioned already, is danger, murder, mystery. And so the characters from Secret History by Donna Tartt go to this remote mansion somewhere and get drunk and talk about all these intellectual subjects. But the story itself is similar to what the romantic poets did back in their day, where they used to go on these recluse vacations and get drunk. And Frankenstein is actually a book that came about because of this, written by Shelley's wife, Mary Shelley. They were they challenged each other, and they wanted to see who could come up with the best horror story. And basically she invented this whole genre of horror. And it's so, there was a lot of time for them to think about these things, because they already had the money to do those things. People were doing everyday chores for them. They didn't have to invest in maybe cleaning the house, or paying up their bills, because they had servants who could do this. But right now we can't really indulge in that kind of lifestyle, and the only way to indulge this is through fantasy, and that's through books and movies, where the characters, you live vicariously through them. The characters, they have enough money to indulge in these things. You should watch The Riot Club, where these again, it's set in, I think, 50s or 60s, where they go around getting drunk, partying, and they have a secret cult and a secret society. But one thing that's very apparent there is how they destroy other people's property just because they are rich. And that is something very common within dark academia. Because of the fact that you're rich, you can pay for the damage you do. There is this constant self-destructive behavior and destruction to property and other people, that's very, very on your face when you watch The Riot Club. There are all these, again, beauty is very, very common theme in this particular aesthetic. The Riot Club actually shows, all these men who are, you would call them, they look like Greek statues. That, but very Eurocentric, but very, divine kind of beauty that people from the subculture subscribe to. Now, because of these criticisms, the fact that it's not inclusive, it's, again, very Eurocentric, it's not, it's very elitist. There is also the fact that it's every literary piece that has been written since the resurgence of this aesthetic is being written through the female gaze, and how it's kind of toxic as well. That's what I am going to talk about now. If you read these books, right, no, I'm not talking about the Picture of Dorian Gray, because it was written by a gay man about homosexual relationships. But if you look at the Secret History or the Riot Club, these were written by women. But one thing is, there's this constant fetishization of gay relationships, especially male and male relationships. Exploring these characters, you would understand that they're very deep, they are well fleshed out, and they have depth. They are not, they're not just pretty people existing for the sake of existing and, indulging in all these things. There is some level of character development, but apart from that, there is, because of the fact that's written by women, you will see that there are not that many female characters there. There are only a lot of cis men who might be, it's not given in the text, it's not canon, it's just in the subtext that they might be gay for each other, but that's left up to the imagination of the readers, because the author herself has written it as only a fantasy, right? And one concept that I would like to explore is how there is, a constant, like, straight men tend to get aroused by lesbians, and that's like very, it's a wrong thing to do. They face a lot of criticism. But when straight men write a lot of fan fictions, when they indulge in gay stories, it's mostly not because they're supporting, it's because they're fetishizing that relationship itself. And I know this personally because I was in this One Direction fandom, and there were a lot of like gay fan fiction that was going around, floating around about the band members. And most at that age, when I was 13, I was like, yeah, that's good writing, that's all I thought about. But then now, as I'm a grown woman now, I can see that there's this constant fetishization, and I indulged in it as well. I'm guilty of it too. Now, coming back to this particular aesthetic, and the story is that even Dead Poet Society, that you'll see a lot of fan fiction floating around that connects the main characters, and they're gay, a lot of theories. Now, it's never, one thing is that the authors also play safe. They're not really directly putting gay characters into the story. They're only giving hints for the readers to pick up on, so that there's a lot more interest generated in the work itself. Now, that's again, a lot of gay people tend to read anything that has even like slightly gay undertones, because they're like so starved for any type of representation, and anything is better than nothing, right? Now, what this means is that some of these characters are feminine in like very traditionally feminine ways, and that also perpetuates the idea that gay men want to be female, when male gaze is like all about objectification of women, mostly from male eyes, cis heterosexual male eyes. Female gaze is all about emotions and feelings, and it is also harmful in a way, because right now there's a trend of if you were on TikTok before, you would have noticed this trend of e-boys are basically this like epitome of female gaze, where they are very feminine presenting. They're not all muscled up, and they are not like I'm so macho. They're not like that. They're very, very feminine presenting. They're okay with painting their nails, and like it's such a a breaking barrier of femininity, because finally men are doing that. Technically e-boys, but men aren't really doing that just yet. Like, it hasn't really seeped into the millennials. It's only Gen Z and like younger generations doing it. In this kind of scenario, even the minimal thing that you could do, just like painting your nails and like posting thirst traps on TikTok, is enough to make women want you. That's the least a boy could do, and girls are already, they're so accepting of it, which is good in a way. But at the core of it's also telling that men who go and work out in gyms, they are not like appealing to women anymore. I've come across a lot of videos where men say that I went to the gym to like get pull girls, but I'm only pulling boys, because boys come and ask, how do I get such huge muscles and all that. But in the beginning, their journey always begins to attract women, but then ends in a way like it's also a good thing in some ways, but it ends in their own self-acceptance. They like their body. But again, another thing to note is that gym goers, especially men, have very high body dysmorphia. They, even though they are from an objective point of view, they are healthy, they are fit, but then they are like, I still have to work better, because that's what is being portrayed in mainstream media, i.e. Hollywood, as attractive. So one example of this would be like I don't know if you guys remember Terminator, and Transformers, and all these, it's very from, men are also subjected to male gaze, where they are being constantly told, at least in that time, and I think even up until now, that bulking up and looking so macho is what women like, and that's what men should aspire to as well. And it's harmful in a way, because you don't have to constantly tell people what they should be, confined to the female gaze, confined to the male gaze. They don't have to, like people don't have to be categorized into those very narrow boxes. And one example that I would like to end with is written by women and written by men tropes. Now, back in 2013, written by men tropes was very common. Like, I used to come, and it used to be so sexualized. Like, she's so sad and her breasts are, sagging or something like that. And it didn't make, and you would see how stark it is, the way, like, women are only, like, broken down to their bodies, their physical bodies, and they're only sexual objects, they're nothing more. But in the female gaze now, that I think that trend came back in 2021, beginning of 2021. So written by men usually is like, some TikToks that were like written by men, and like, you'll be very hypersexualized clothing, hypersexualized makeup and expressions. And written by women will be sunny dresses, feminine, and sun hats, and they were very female presenting, right? And in a way, you're kind of also promoting toxic femininity, where if you abide by, wearing flowy dresses, you'll appeal to the female gaze. And even straight women are not exempt from this. Straight women tend to look at women and think, oh, she is dressing for other men. Again, internalized misogyny and patriarchy. These are like very deep concepts that, like, if you sit and think about, you realize what a farce we are living in. So finally, what I would like to say is that female gaze is very, very prominent within this particular subculture, and there have been like other subcultures that have come up to like balance it out, so to say. And they are, light academia, that's basically all about light colors and, like, all about optimism. It's not very pessimistic like how dark academia is. Then there is also Desi dark academia that's coming up. I put up some pictures here. You can see, like, acceptance of your own ethnicity, and this played a very major part in my own acceptance of my ethnicity a year back during the pandemic. Again, wearing these clothes and, like, putting on, like, your bindi, and these are things that I stopped doing because I so badly wanted to conform to that Eurocentric ideals. But then now I'm fine with all those things, and I actively seek out to any opportunity to, like, put on a sari or, put on a bindi, because that's an expression of my identity. I don't have to constantly conform to Eurocentric ideals. I can finally, I'm comfortable in my own ethnicity. And looking at these posts and reading the text from these posts really, like, boosted my own acceptance of my ethnicity. And I think that's a very good thing, because if you read that, like, at the core of it, this subculture, the dark academia subculture, is itself romanticizing all these things that are being taken away from us because of capitalism. Learning for the joy of learning, dressing up, and, like, indulging in hedonistic pleasures just because you can, because at the end of the day, you have only one life. And as far as global problems are concerned, there's, climate change and all that, we might not even live up to, like, say 40 or 50. In that case, it's like, it's okay to indulge in these things, in small things. Live life at this very moment, because you don't know what's going to happen. And right now, I think it's much more relevant than ever, because we are living in the middle of a pandemic, and it feels like it's going out, but is it really going out? And there is not enough hope for the future. So I think it's better in some ways to just, like, live life right now and not think about what's going to happen next, because the worst is now. That's it. Thank you.